The late afternoon sun, a pale gold filtered through the spring rain, usually brought a sense of renewal to my small workshop. Today, however, the air felt heavy with an impending storm, both outside and in my gut. My name is Chloe, and this space, filled with the scent of welding fumes, cut metal, and the quiet presence of my sculptures, was my sanctuary, the place where I translated the chaotic energy of the city into tangible form. For 3 years, I'd poured everything into this, a silent defiance against the world my family, the powerful Sterling real estate dynasty, expected me to inhabit. Tomorrow was the Spring Arts Collective Showcase, my chance to finally step out of the shadows and prove that my passion for metalwork was more than just a rebellious phase. My phone buzzed on the workbench, the caller ID flashing Martha Sterling. I hesitated, my gloved hand still resting on a half-finished piece. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Chloe, darling, your father and I are downtown. We need to pop by your studio immediately." My stomach clenched. They never popped by, especially not here. "Mom, I'm busy getting ready for the showcase tomorrow." Her voice, usually so smooth, was tight. "This cannot wait. We're only a few blocks away." A sense of dread washed over me. I quickly tidied what I could, the clatter of tools echoing in the sudden quiet. Their town car was waiting at the curb when I got downstairs, a stark symbol of their world parked on the rain-slick street. As I opened the door, Mom, looking immaculate despite the damp air, offered a strained smile. "Chloe," she said, her voice a low murmur, this workshop business, it's become untenable." Dad, a towering figure of authority, stepped in behind her, his face set in a grim expression that mirrored the gray sky. "Come in," I said, leading them up the industrial stairs. The workshop, with its scattered tools, towering metal forms, and the ever-present scent of my work, seemed to shrink them, making them look out of place. I was hoping. "You might see my work, see what I'm creating. I even thought, maybe you could attend the showcase tomorrow." Dad cut me off, his voice sharp and dismissive. "That's precisely why we're here, Chloe. This fascination of yours. It's gone far enough, it's becoming a liability." He gestured vaguely towards a large sculpture I had recently completed, a complex arrangement of intertwined metal representing the resilience of forgotten urban spaces. Mom visibly stiffened. "The Vanderbilts inquired about you at the country club luncheon last week," Mom said, delicately perching on the edge of a sturdy metal crate covered with a canvas drop cloth. "I had to say you were pursuing a private endeavor out of state. Do you know how awkward that was, Chloe?" Awkward, my voice trembled slightly, but a spark of defiance ignited within me. "I'm working, Mom. I'm building something real." "Building what?" Dad scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "A reputation for eccentricity? The Sterling name carries weight in this city, Chloe. We have a position to maintain. We cannot have our daughter engaging in manual labor in a neighborhood like this." "Manual labor?" I retorted, finding my voice. "I sold a piece last month. I have interest from a prominent consultant." "Enough," Dad said, pulling out a tablet. He swiped to a legal document. "We've finalized the acquisition of this entire block. Your lease is null and void. This property is slated for immediate redevelopment." He paused, his expression shifting, a calculated softening I recognized. "We've secured a position for you at Sterling Properties, head of our new design liaison division. It's stable, prestigious." The air felt thin, heavy with the weight of their expectations and this sudden, brutal maneuver. You bought the building, you can't just terminate my lease like this." Mom added, her voice a low, controlled murmur. "It's all arranged, darling. A clean transition. For the best." "This is my life," I exclaimed, my hand instinctively reaching out to touch the cool, rough surface of one of my sculptures. "My work, my identity. It's time to join the real world, Chloe," Dad stated, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You have until the end of the month. Accept the position at the firm and this phase will be behind you, or," Mom finished, her voice hardening like setting concrete, "or you are no longer a part of this family. No access to the family trust, no more financial support, no more Sterling connections. You will be completely on your own." The silence that followed was deeper than any quiet I had ever known in the workshop. "You're asking me to choose," I said, my voice barely a whisper, the sense of betrayal a cold wave washing over me between my passion and your control. "We are asking you to choose a sensible future," Dad corrected, his jaw tight. Is the sterling name all that truly matters to you? I challenged, the bitterness rising in my throat. Don't be dramatic, darling, Mom sighed, turning away slightly. We are doing this for your own good. To protect you. I looked around my workshop, at the pieces that felt like fragments of my soul, at the place where I finally felt authentic. Then I looked at my parents, standing there in their impeccable clothes, embodying the suffocating world I had so desperately tried to escape. Get out, I said, the words a quiet force, imbued with years of suppressed frustration. Dad's face contorted in disbelief. Excuse me? I said, get out, both of you. If you cannot respect who I am, what I create, then there is nothing more to say. Nothing more to be. Mom stepped forward, her hand outstretched. Chloe, please, think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, I replied, my voice raw with emotion. Every single day for the past 3 years, while you've treated my life's work like a dirty secret. They left without another word, the heavy door clanging shut behind them, a final, echoing punctuation mark. I stood there, surrounded by my creations, my dreams, my hard-won independence, until the rain outside seemed to mirror the tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed. It was Liam, my closest friend. Still on for Thai food and studio time. Through blurry eyes, I typed back, change of plans, bring something strong, very strong. Weeks turned into months. The spring rain gave way to the humid heat of summer. The ultimatum was not an idle threat. It was executed with cold, efficient precision. My bank accounts were inaccessible, credit cards canceled, my name systematically removed from any and all family associations. The financial pressure was a constant, gnawing worry, but the defiance forged that rainy afternoon solidified into a fierce, unyielding resolve. My work became more intense, more reflective of the struggle and the unexpected strength I found within myself. Liam found me hunched over a piece of salvaged metal, sparks flying from my grinder, the heat from the tool mixing with the summer humidity. Earth to Chloe, he said, carefully stepping around a pile of metal scraps. You're in the zone again, that 1,000-yard stare. I mumbled something about the looming rent deadline. Hey, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Forget about the bills for a second. That major gallery show Maxwell Vance is curating. It's in 2 months, focus on that, you've got momentum building. The piece I was working on was unlike anything I'd done before. A complex, intricate structure of twisted metal and fused glass. A representation of fragility within strength. Resilience born from shattering. Whoa, Liam whispered, stepping back, his eyes wide. That's powerful. It's like looking at something beautiful forged in the fire. The workshop door opened, letting in a blast of hot, humid air. A man I didn't immediately recognize stepped inside. He wore a lightweight linen suit that seemed impossibly cool and crisp in the oppressive heat. Forgive the intrusion, he said, his voice calm and even. The gallery downtown mentioned I might find the artist Chloe Sterling here. That's me, I replied, pushing my safety goggles up onto my forehead, wiping sweat from my brow with the back of my glove. Maxwell Vance, he extended a hand, his grip firm. I saw your piece at the City Grid exhibition last month, the one with the salvaged steel and reclaimed wood. My heart leaped into my throat. Maxwell Vance. I knew the name, a highly respected art consultant, a major player in the contemporary art world, known for discovering groundbreaking talent. I've been following your work since then, he continued, walking slowly around the workshop, his eyes taking in every detail, every sculpture, every tool. Your evolution over the past few months is compelling. There's a new depth, a raw honesty. He stopped in front of the glass and metal sculpture, studying it intently. There's vulnerability here, he observed quietly, but also an incredible resilience. A refusal to break. He turned to face me. Would you tell me about it? It's personal, I admitted. The best work always is, he smiled. That's precisely why I'm here. I'm curating a major exhibition this fall at the prestigious Atherton Gallery. The theme is Breaking Point, Art Forged in Pressure. I want to feature your work. Liam gasped audibly beside me. The Atherton. Breaking Point, the Atherton Gallery was one of the city's most esteemed institutions, a place where my family often hosted private events. But, my family, the Atherton is one of the venues for the Sterling Foundation's annual Autumn Charity Gala. Maxwell's eyes held a knowing glint. Indeed, I'm quite aware of your family's significant connection to the Atherton Gallery and the Foundation. In fact, I find it adds a certain compelling subtext, wouldn't you agree? My hands began to tremble, the heat in the workshop suddenly feeling suffocating. They wouldn't want my work associated with that space with their gala. Art isn't about want, Miss Sterling, it's about truth. About resonance, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a sleek business card, placing it carefully on my workbench next to a pile of metal filings. The exhibition opens 2 weeks before the Sterling Foundation Gala. Think about it. I would need at least 3 significant pieces, including this one. He gestured to the glass and metal sculpture. Your family's event is the week after, if I recall. Timed for maximum impact, wouldn't you say? As he headed for the door, he paused. And Chloe, don't let anyone convince you to soften your edges. Some of the most beautiful forms are forged when things are pushed to their breaking point. After he left, Liam and I stood in stunned silence, the hum of the city drifting in through the open door. Did that just happen? Liam whispered, his eyes wide. I can't, I said, sinking onto a metal stool, the weight of the implications, the potential confrontation settling heavily on me, putting my work there. It'll be seen as a direct challenge, a public rebuke. Good, Liam said, sitting beside me on a crate. Let them. They tried to dismantle your life, Chloe. Show them what happens when you push a creator to her breaking point. I picked up Maxwell's card, the embossed lettering feeling sharp and significant. It would disrupt everything for them, I murmured, thinking of the meticulously planned autumn gala, the carefully curated image my family projected. Liam grabbed my shoulders, his gaze intense. This isn't just an opportunity, Chloe. It's a platform. It's a reckoning. I walked back to the glass and metal sculpture. It stood before me, fragile yet strong, a symbol of the pressures I had faced and the resilience I had found. You're right, I said, picking up my welding torch. But if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need a lot more raw material. Weeks later, on a sweltering summer afternoon, my Uncle Frank, the slightly disheveled, perpetually casual outlier of the Sterling family, appeared at the workshop door. He was the only family member who had ever genuinely seen and encouraged my artistic inclinations, dismissing my parents' disapproval with a shrug and a wry smile. He chuckled, looking around the space, sweat beading on his forehead. Well, looks like you've turned up the heat, Chloe. Uncle Frank, I exclaimed, genuinely surprised and happy to see him. How did you find me? Your friend Liam gave me directions, he said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief, walking slowly around, taking in each sculpture, each piece of work in progress. Martha's been telling everyone you're on an extended, creative retreat overseas. Maxwell, who was visiting to finalize the details for the Atherton exhibition, raised an eyebrow. And you believed that, Frank? Please, Uncle Frank scoffed, adjusting his worn leather jacket despite the heat. I've been the family eccentric and wanderer for decades. I recognize the narrative. Though he smiled at me, you're making my own youthful rebellions look rather tame. He turned to Maxwell. Mr. Vance, this is my Uncle Frank Sterling, the only one in the family who ever got it. Maxwell smiled, another individualist. Always the most insightful members of any lineage. Uncle Frank stopped in front of my largest piece for the Atherton, a monumental assembly of glass and metal, depicting a beautiful, intricate form pushing its way out of a constricting, angular structure. They're talking about you, he said quietly, his voice losing some of its usual lightness. At their summer parties, their golf club meetings, your cousin Brittany is dropping hints about your unforeseen challenges and difficult phase. Brittany, I hadn't thought of her since our uncomfortable lunch. She was the perfect Sterling daughter, impeccably groomed, destined for a prestigious marriage and a life of carefully curated social events. What's she saying? Nothing direct, he replied. Just enough to ensure everyone understands the Sterlings are navigating a sensitive family matter, managing expectations. He turned back to me. But that's not why I'm here. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small, leather-bound journal, aged and slightly worn, tied with a faded ribbon. Your grandmother Aliner's journal. From her personal effects, my mother's mother, a name associated with elegant restraint, a life lived entirely within the bounds of Sterling decorum. I took the book carefully, my hands trembling slightly. Found it recently, he explained. Read it, Chloe, especially the entries from the late 1950s and early 60s. Might offer some perspective on all this. He gestured to my sculptures, a sweeping motion encompassing the raw power and emotional depth in the room. I opened the journal to a random page, my grandmother's elegant, flowing script filling the yellowed paper. They say a woman's role is to be the graceful cornerstone of the family, silent and beautiful. But what if the very foundation is built on illusions, on unspoken longings? She was a sculptor, Uncle Frank explained, his voice soft, a note of sadness in it. A talented one, worked in secret late at night in the old carriage house. Created incredible pieces. Your grandfather found out, made her stop. Said it wasn't fitting for a sterling wife to engage in such physical pursuits to have a public voice. Maxwell stepped forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced with intense interest. Did she ever exhibit under a pseudonym? Uncle Frank nodded. After he passed away. Quietly, though, local shows. Won a few minor awards, but by then Martha was grown, married to Richard, already focused on upholding appearances, on being the perfect. Sterling wife, he touched the journal gently. Your grandmother died, I think, feeling she'd failed Martha. Failed because Martha had so perfectly embraced the life Alina herself had been forced into. My hands shook as I held the journal, the weight of generations of suppressed creativity pressing down on me. Why are you showing me this now? Because you need to understand, he said, his eyes holding mine. This struggle you're facing, the pressure to conform to fit their mold, it's not new. It's a thread that runs through your lineage. But you, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile, you've got the fire, the courage she didn't have. And he glanced at Maxwell, you've got the platform and the timing. Maxwell cleared his throat. The Atherton exhibition opens in a few months, 2 weeks before the gala. I know, Uncle Frank grinned, a flash of mischief returning to his eyes. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Already secured my invitation. They'll try to stop it, I said, the certainty cold in my stomach. Once they understand the full implications. Let them try, Uncle Frank's voice hardened, losing its usual lightheartedness. I've watched that family stifle too many spirits, too many dreams. It's time someone showed them what happens when creativity refuses to be confined, when it breaks free. He headed for the door, then paused, the playful glint returning to his eyes. Oh, and Chloe. Brittany mentioned she'll be at the Ivy for lunch next Tuesday around noon. Just thought you might like to know. After he left, the workshop seemed quieter, the humid air thick with the weight of history and unspoken truths. Maxwell and I stood in silence for a moment, looking at the journal, at the sculptures. Well, Maxwell finally said, breaking the quiet, I believe we just found the heart of your exhibition. What do you mean? I asked. Your grandmother's words, woven into your art, he gestured expansively. It's no longer just your story, Chloe. It's a legacy of resistance, a breaking of the mold across generations. I opened the journal again, reading another entry. Art isn't polished. Art isn't conforming. Art is truth, and truth is a disruptive force to those who build their lives on illusions. I need more glass, I said, already reaching for my phone. And I need to make a lunch reservation for next Tuesday. Maxwell smiled, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. Now that's the fire I knew was there. Show them what happens when you try to constrain two generations of creators. Looking at my sculptures, at my grandmother's hidden words, at the future suddenly opening before me, I replied, no. I'll show them what happens when the pressure reaches its breaking point, and the truth shatters the facade. The ivy hadn't changed. Same hushed elegance, same white tablecloths, same wealthy clientele pretending not to observe each other over their carefully chosen lunches. I spotted Brittany immediately, her perfect blonde waves catching the sunlight as she scrolled on her phone, an island of studied composure. Well, look who decided to grace the city with her presence after all, I said, sliding into the seat across from her, a hint of a challenge in my voice. She jumped, nearly dropping her phone. Chloe, I thought you were enjoying your retreat. Did Aunt Martha tell you that? I signaled the waiter. Atherton Reserve neat, and she'll have another glass of whatever chilled white wine that is. Brittany's eyes widened slightly. How did you know? Some things never change. I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Like how you always meet your key information sources here on Tuesdays at noon. Brittany shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Brittany, I said, my voice low but clear. You've been dropping hints about my unforeseen challenges and difficult phase all over town. At least have the courage to say it to my face. The waiter brought our drinks. Brittany took a large gulp of her wine. Aunt Martha is deeply concerned, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. You're causing her significant stress. By forging my own path, I asked, leaning back slightly. By refusing to conform, by embarrassing the family. She leaned forward, lowering her voice further, her eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. Do you know what people are saying, Chloe? Actually, I don't, I replied, a genuine, though somewhat detached, curiosity in my voice. Do enlighten me. They're saying you've had some kind of episode that you're living in some industrial squat, working with dangerous materials, that you're unstable. I laughed, a loud, unapologetic sound that made nearby diners pause their conversations. Is that the best the sterling rumor mill could come up with? Unstable? It's not funny, Chloe, she hissed, her face flushing. The autumn gala is coming up. Everyone's asking if you'll be there. Aunt Martha had to tell the foundation board you're dealing with. Personal health matters. Personal health matters, I repeated, taking a slow sip of the smooth whiskey. Like finally reclaiming my own sanity, like refusing to be stifled, like throwing away everything for a phase, she countered, her voice laced with the family's ingrained disdain for anything outside their narrow definition of success. A phase? I pulled out my phone and showed her the preview images and description from Maxwell Vance's upcoming Atherton Gallery exhibition catalog. Is that what you call being the featured artist in a major exhibition? Being hailed as a significant emerging voice? Having my work acquired for a permanent collection? Brittany's face went ashen as she read the screen. Featured. Where? In the Breaking Point exhibition, I said, my voice casual, letting the information land. At the Atherton Gallery, opening 2 weeks before the Sterling Foundation Gala. Her eyes darted back and forth between the phone and me, her composure completely shattered. You can't, she whispered, the words barely audible. It would destroy her. After all her work for the foundation, the gala is her triumph. Like she tried to dismantle my life? I stood up, dropping a few bills onto the table, the crisp sound cutting through the hushed murmurs of the restaurant. You know the fundamental difference between you and me, Brittany? I actually build things. Real, tangible, impactful things. Not just a carefully constructed social image built on old money and whispered judgments. Wait, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging slightly into my skin. There's something you should know about the gala. Oh, I raised an eyebrow, a sense of grim anticipation building. Aunt Martha, she's being formally recognized that night for her decades of service. It's a major moment for her. The culmination of everything. And it's timed perfectly. I finished her sentence, the pieces clicking into place. For maximum impact. Please, Chloe, she pleaded, her voice trembling. She's worked her entire life for this recognition. So have I said, pulling my arm free. And unlike her, I built this with my own hands. Every piece, every connection, every opportunity. Every ounce of strength forged under pressure. You're just doing this for revenge, she accused, her voice thick with desperation. No, I said, gathering my jacket. I'm doing this because I am a sculptor, I create, and sometimes. Creation involves a certain amount of disruption. When you push metal to its breaking point, it transforms. When you push people, the truth shatters the facade. The revenge, I added, a small, cold smile touching my lips, is simply a satisfying byproduct of the process. I was halfway to the door when she called out, her voice strained. They'll never forgive you for this, Chloe. I paused, turning back, my gaze steady. Maybe, but I'll never regret finally showing them who I truly am, forging my own path. Back at the workshop, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows. Uncle Frank was waiting, looking casual as ever, perched on a stool. Heard you had lunch with young Brittany, he said, a knowing glint in his eyes. How's our little information leak? Terrified, I replied, walking towards my largest piece for the Atherton, selecting a new piece of metal. She informed me about Aunt Martha's impending recognition at the gala, her culmination of everything. Ah, he nodded, a slow grin spreading across his face. The final layer on the perfect sterling facade. Did you know that was happening? Why do you think Maxwell Vance and I chose the Atherton and timed it the way we did? I replied, picking up my welding torch. Sometimes the most effective disruption is simply perfect timing. Leveraging the existing structure, I began to work, the torch spitting sparks, shaping metal into intricate forms that mirrored the turbulent emotions still swirling within me. but also the strength I had found. This isn't just about disruption anymore, Frank, I said over the hiss and pop of the weld. I told him about finding Grandma Aliner's unpublished manuscript tucked within her journal, the story about the woman who finally broke free from the constraints of her world, the daughter who chose to fit the mold her father built, the enduring power of suppressed creativity. Uncle Frank watched me work in silence for a long moment, the air thick with the scent of ozone and hot metal. Your mother never saw it, Aliner's final words. Her true artistic legacy. I know, I said, stepping back to look at the emerging sculpture, the beautiful, intricate form pushing its way out of the constricting, angular structure. But she's about to, all of it. In solid metal and fused glass, on display for everyone to see, at the Atherton. He warned me again that they would try to stop me once they understood the full implications. Let them try, I said, selecting a glowing, malleable piece of glass from the kiln. Some truths need to be forged in the hottest fire, even if the process shatters everything they've built. And you're ready for that fire? He asked. Thinking of Brittany's pale face, of my grandmother's hidden life, of my mother's carefully constructed facade of perfection, I replied, I'm not just ready. I'm the one igniting the furnace. The Atherton Gallery hummed with anticipation. The air, usually hushed and reverent, was alive with a nervous energy. Through the vast, modern windows, I watched the city's elite arrive in their limousines and town cars, their practiced smiles in place, exchanging air kisses and social pleasantries, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift about to occur within these glass and steel walls. They have no idea what's coming, do they? Liam whispered beside me, adjusting the simple, elegant dress I'd chosen, a stark contrast to the elaborate gowns I'd worn to sterling events in the past, and certainly a far cry from my usual work clothes. 5 minutes to doors open, Maxwell Vance announced, appearing beside us, looking sharp and calmly in control. The press is already buzzing about the covered centerpiece. The rumors are. Circulating, let them buzz, I said, touching the heavy black drape hiding my largest, most significant piece. Some revelations are worth the wait. The gallery doors opened, and the crowd flowed in a glittering, murmuring tide of expensive fabric and polished shoes. I recognized faces from my old life, people who had smiled and nodded at me at country club brunches and charity auctions. Foundation board members, distant relatives, social figures I had known since childhood. Now they whispered behind their champagne flutes, pointing discreetly at my sculptures. The cage, the fractured forms, the pieces that hinted at the story about to unfold. Chloe, darling, Uncle Frank's voice boomed across the room, cutting through the polite murmurs. He enveloped me in a warm hug that smelled faintly of metal cleaner and something comforting. They're all here. Every last one of them. He leaned in and pointed subtly across the room. Martha and Richard, over by the far wall. Martha's doing her best to project serene composure, but Richard looks like he's about to spontaneously combust. I glanced over. My parents stood stiffly, their bodies radiating tension. Mom wore a dress that was a masterpiece of sartorial armor, while Dad's jaw was visibly clenched even from this distance. Ladies and gentlemen, Maxwell's voice cut through the crowd's murmurs, amplified just enough to command attention. If you'll gather round, we're about to begin. The crowd shifted, forming a loose semicircle around the covered centerpiece. I saw Brittany slip in late, her face pale as she took in the other sculptures, the pieces that hinted at the story about to unfold. Tonight, Maxwell continued, his voice clear and resonant, we celebrate not just art, but truth. The kind of truth that often lies buried beneath expectations, beneath carefully constructed facades, beneath family names and social obligations. We explore the breaking point, the moment when pressure transforms. He gestured to me. Please join me in welcoming the artist, Chloe Sterling. My boots clicked against the polished concrete floor as I stepped forward, walking into the heavy, expectant silence of the crowd. These pieces, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the hushed space, tell a story. Not just my story, but the story of anyone who has ever been told to shrink themselves, to silence their voice, to fit a pre-designed mold. They are about the moment the pressure becomes too much, the moment of transformation. I met my mother's eyes across the room, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. They are about the structures we inhabit, the facades we build, and what happens when we finally gather the courage to reach our breaking point and shatter the illusion. I nodded to Maxwell. Two assistants stepped forward, gripping the edges of the heavy black drape. Mom, I said, my voice loud and clear, directed specifically at her across the room. This piece, this one, is dedicated to the moment of reckoning. The drape fell. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. In the stunning silence that followed, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. The sculpture stood before them, a monumental assembly of glass and metal, a complex, intricate form pushing its way out of a constricting, angular structure, the glass shimmering like shattered ice, the metal gleaming with a raw power. It was imposing, raw, and undeniably powerful. Up close, the intricate details I had painstakingly worked on were visible. Subtle inclusions referencing the Sterling Foundation's original, idealistic goals now encased in restrictive metal, hidden inscriptions with lines from my grandmother Alina's journal woven into the metal forms, almost invisible at first glance, but undeniably present. "Oh my God," Brittany whispered loudly, her voice cutting through the silence. Those are from Grandma Alina's journals, and that structure, it looks like." "Yes," my mother's voice, surprisingly strong, cut through the murmurs that were beginning to spread. She stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. "Those are my mother's words, the ones I pretended not to hear, the ones I tried so hard to forget, and the structure, it is a representation of the world she lived in." "The world I lived in." The crowd parted as she approached the sculpture, drawn by the unexpected, raw emotion. Up close, the intricate details were undeniable. A small, welded representation of a specific trowel Alina used, inscribed lines referencing her hidden sculptures, shattered glass representing moments of suppressed emotion. You had no right," Mom whispered, her voice lacking its usual conviction, the carefully constructed facade of composure finally cracking. "I had every right," I replied softly, my gaze steady. "Just like Grandma Alina had every right to create, just like I have every right to forge my truth, to show what happens at the breaking point." Dad stepped forward, his face dark with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "This ends now," he announced, his voice booming through the gallery. "I'll buy every piece, name your price." "They're not for sale, Mr. Sterling," Maxwell interjected smoothly, stepping forward with an air of quiet authority. "In fact, these pieces have already been acquired by the Atherton Gallery for their permanent collection." The whispers in the crowd grew louder, more insistent. Mom swayed slightly, reaching out a hand to steady herself against a nearby pedestal. Martha, a foundation board member, approached cautiously. "Perhaps we should discuss the recognition ceremony at the gala." "No need," my mother said, her voice suddenly clear, resonating with a new strength I had rarely heard. She turned to face the crowd, her spine straightening, the armor of her perfect social persona finally falling away. "I am stepping down from all my roles and responsibilities with the Sterling Foundation, effective immediately." "Mom," Brittany gasped, horrified. "It's time for authenticity, isn't it?" Mom looked at me, truly looked at me, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of regret, understanding, and something that looked surprisingly like pride. "My daughter isn't the one who reached her breaking point and shattered something here. I did. I broke my own silence. I shattered the illusion. I disappointed myself. I disappointed my mother. And worst of all," her voice caught slightly, "I nearly crushed the artist my daughter became by forcing her into the same mold that constrained me." She reached out and touched the sculpture gently, tracing a line of inscribed text. "The weight of expectation," she murmured, then louder to the assembled crowd, "Well, the weight is lifted. No more silence, no more pretense, not tonight." The gallery erupted in a cacophony of murmurs, exclamations, and the sudden clicking of cameras as reporters seized the moment. But all I saw was my mother's face, transformed by something that looked remarkably like liberation. Uncle Frank appeared at my side, a wide grin on his face. "Now that," he whispered, "is what I call a masterpiece. The ultimate transformation." The aftermath of the exhibition opening felt like the eye of a hurricane. Reporters swarmed the gallery, cameras flashing, questions flying. Dad had stormed out almost immediately after Mom's declaration, followed by most of his business associates. Brittany hovered uncertainly near the entrance, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Miss Sterling," a reporter from the City Ledger thrust a microphone toward me. "Your exhibition seems to be a powerful critique of societal pressure and generational expectations. Was that your intention?" Before I could formulate a response, my mother stepped forward, drawing the reporter's attention. My daughter, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the room, has done what I never had the courage to do. The reporters turned to her like hounds sensing a scent. Mrs. Sterling, another reporter called out cautiously, how do you respond to the highly personal nature of these pieces, specifically the centerpiece and the inclusion of your mother's writings? Personal, Mom laughed, a genuine, unforced sound I hadn't heard in years. Art should be personal, it should challenge us, it should heal us, it should reveal truth. My daughter's work does all of that. Maxwell appeared at my side, a pleased expression on his face. The Tribune is calling it a searing examination of inherited limitations and the power of creative liberation. Limitations? Uncle Frank snorted, joining us. Looks more like liberation to me. A commotion near the entrance drew our attention. My father had returned, this time with a grim-faced lawyer clutching a leather briefcase. That's enough, Dad announced, his voice cutting through the buzz. This exhibition is causing irreparable damage. My lawyer has prepared a cease and desist order. On what grounds, Mr. Sterling? Maxwell stepped forward, smiling pleasantly. Defamation, invasion of privacy. Take your pick, everything here is either artistic interpretation or documented fact, Maxwell replied calmly. The Atherton Gallery's legal team has already thoroughly reviewed and approved every piece. And the inclusion of Miss Alina Sterling's private writings was done with permission from a legal heir, Mr. Frank Sterling, who is present. I don't care about your lawyers. Dad's face was bright red with fury, losing all semblance of control. This is family business. You're destroying the Sterling name. No, Mom's voice rang out, surprisingly strong and resolute. She walked towards the centerpiece sculpture, her gaze steady. This is art, Richard, it's truth. And it's staying, Dad turned to her stunned. Martha, you can't be serious after what she's done. What she's done to us, publicly humiliating us. What she's done, Mom repeated, gesturing at the sculpture, at the pushing, striving form breaking free from the rigid structure. Look at it, Richard, really look. This isn't about punishment, it's about release. It's about me, about my mother. About every woman in this family who was told to be less than she was, to fit a mold that would eventually break her. Your mother, Dad scoffed, his voice dripping with disbelief. What does she have to do with any of this? Mom pulled the small, worn leather journal from her clutch. Did you know she was a sculptor, Richard? A talented one. Did you know she created beautiful pieces in secret for years? She opened the journal to a marked page. Did you know she wrote about me? About the path I chose? The gallery had fallen silent again, witnessing this unexpected, deeply personal confrontation unfold publicly. I found her journals after she died, Mom continued, her voice thick with emotion. But I was too afraid to read them, too afraid to see myself through her eyes, too afraid to confront the truth she captured about the choices I made. She looked at me, her gaze steady. Until now. Mrs. Sterling, a reporter called out cautiously, are you saying you support your daughter's exhibition? Despite its perceived critique of your family? Support it? Mom smiled, a real radiant smile that transformed her face. I'm proud of it, proud of her. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing the truth about our family, about myself. And yes, it's painful, but it's also incredibly liberating. Dad's lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him. Mr. Sterling, if your wife isn't willing to support the cease and desist action, to hell with the cease and desist, Dad snapped, his face a mask of fury. Martha, think about what you're doing, your reputation. My reputation is less important than speaking my truth. Mom turned back to the crowd, her voice clear and strong. I am stepping down from all my foundation roles, not in defeat, but because it is time for new voices, new perspectives. It is time for authenticity, for breaking the mold. Brittany suddenly stepped forward, her voice small but clear, tears glistening in her eyes. Aunt Martha is right. She faced the reporters, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. This family, we've all been living behind facades, pretending. Chloe is just the first one brave enough to reach her breaking point and reveal the truth. The reporters surged forward again, questions overlapping, the silence shattered by a cacophony of voices. Through the chaos, I felt a hand slip into mine. It was Mom's. Her grip was firm. Chloe, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry for everything, for not seeing you, for trying to fit you into a mold that was never yours. Mom, no, I started, but she squeezed my hand tighter. Let me finish. Your grandmother, Alina, she would have loved these pieces. She would have loved the artist you've become. Dad stood alone now, his lawyer already retreating into the crowd. He looked lost, a figurehead whose monument had just been dismantled piece by piece. Richard, Mom called to him softly across the room. It's over, the perfect sterling image, the perfect facade, it's all over. And thank goodness for that. He left without a word, disappearing into the crowd, but this time no one followed. Maxwell cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly, a satisfied expression on his face. The city ledger wants an interview with both of you. Mom looked at me, a question in her eyes, a hesitant hope. I nodded, feeling something fundamental shift and settle between us, like two pieces of metal finally fused together after immense pressure. Together, I said. As the reporters gathered around us, eager for more, I caught Uncle Frank's eye across the room. He raised an imaginary glass in a silent toast, a wide, proud grin on his face. So, the Ledger reporter began, turning to us, tell us about the piece. Breaking point, shattered facade. Mom and I looked at each other, a shared understanding passing between us, then turned towards the sculpture that had been the catalyst for this transformation. The truth revealed, the mold broken, the story we had both needed to tell, finally forged in the fire. Well, we said in unison, and for the first time in a long time, we both truly smiled. Summer gave way to the crisp air of autumn. The scent of fallen leaves mixed with the familiar smells of my workshop. The space felt different now, filled with a new energy. My relationship with Mom was tentatively rebuilding, like mending fractured metal. She visited often, not with ultimatums, but with coffee and quiet conversations about art, about Grandma Alina. My latest piece sat on the workbench, two figures, one older, one younger, working together, their forms intertwined and strong, building something new from salvaged materials. This piece felt different from my earlier work. It was lighter, infused with a sense of hope and collaboration. The workshop door creaked open, and Mom stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee and Grandma Alina's well-worn leather-bound journal. Still drawing from Grandma's words? She asked, setting down the cups on a cleared surface. They feel like mine now, too, I replied, stepping back from the sculpture. What do you think? Alina would have loved it, Mom said, her voice soft with emotion, touching the sculpture gently. Both the piece and this place. This place was the new creative hub we had started in Dad's old downtown office building. It was now called The Forge, a nod to the transformation of a space dedicated to rigid profit into one dedicated to the creation of art and community. The irony was a quiet, satisfying hum that resonated through the building. Heard from him? I asked, accepting the coffee. Richards, adjusting, Mom shrugged, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. He's still in London. Apparently the distance is, clarifying, though Brittany tells me he's actually, following your exhibitions online. And how is our favorite reformed social climber? I asked, grinning. Mom laughed. Brittany is throwing herself into urban planning. Says understanding the actual structures of the city is far more challenging than navigating its social ones. The forge door burst open again, letting in a swirl of autumn leaves as Liam rushed in, waving his phone excitedly. You're trending again? That National Art magazine just did a feature on the impact of the Breaking Point exhibition. Show me. Mom and I said in unison, then laughed at our synchronicity. As Liam pulled up the article, Maxwell Vance appeared in the doorway, looking calm and pleased. Chloe Martha, the community workshop starts in 15 minutes. Full house. Including a few very familiar last names from the old guard, he whispered dramatically. Apparently, Martha's poetry and storytelling group is becoming quite the underground movement. Mom straightened her shoulders, a gesture I'd seen countless times at formal events, but now it held a different weight. It wasn't about upholding appearances. It was about standing tall in her own truth. Well, she said, her voice firm, a spark of defiance in her eyes, creative transformation is far more interesting than stagnant tradition, isn't it? Speaking of transformation, Maxwell said, a glint in his eye, Frank's downstairs with something interesting. Uncle Frank bounded up the stairs moments later, his usual worn leather jacket now sporting a few more paint smudges and a distinct whiff of welding smoke. You'll never guess what I unearthed from the old family storage unit this time. He pulled out a rolled-up canvas, tied with string, yellowed with age. Another piece by Alina, unsigned. From the carriage house, Mom's hands shook as she carefully took the canvas. It depicted a woman's hands, strong and capable, shaping clay. She hid so much, Mom murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She did, Uncle Frank agreed. But she also left a trail for those who knew how to look. He glanced at the journal Mom held, then at my sculpture, and for those brave enough to follow. The forge fell quiet for a moment, filled only by the distant sounds of aspiring creators gathering in the workshop downstairs, the murmur of voices, the shuffling of papers, the occasional clink of tools. Well, Maxwell said, checking his watch. Shall we tell them their lineage of creative resistance is even deeper than they knew? Wait, I said, a powerful idea taking root. I looked at the newly found canvas, at Grandma Aliner's journal, at my sculpture, at Mom, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and wonder. Mom, I said, my voice firm but gentle, let's frame it and hang it right here. In the forge, next to my work, next to yours. Mom looked at me, then at the canvas, then back at the bustling energy downstairs. A slow smile spread across her face. Yes, she said, her voice clear. Let's show them. All of it, Uncle Frank nodded in approval. As we prepared to head downstairs, Mom carefully holding the newly found canvas, me with my tools and a piece of metal, Liam nudged me, a wide grin on his face. Look at us. Running a creative rebellion in your father's old corporate temple. If that's not poetic justice. The workshop space was packed. Women of all ages looked up expectantly, notebooks open, some with sketchpads or small hand tools ready. Ladies, Mom said, stepping to the front, holding up the canvas. Today, we talk about legacy. Not the kind that's inherited, but the kind that is built with courage, with creation, with truth. She showed them the canvas. This is a piece by my mother, Aliner Sterling, hidden for decades. Then she held up the journal. These are her words. She gestured to my sculpture. This is my daughter Chloe's work, inspired by that legacy. She then gestured to a piece she had recently started working on herself, abstract forms representing breaking free. And this is my own journey finally finding expression. These pieces, Mom continued, her voice resonating with emotion and newly found strength, tell a story. Not just our story, but the story of anyone who has ever been told to shrink themselves, to silence their voice, to fit a pre-designed mold. They are about the moment the pressure becomes too much, the moment of transformation. I set up a small workspace beside her, selecting a piece of metal and a hammer, ready to work. Every creation, Mom said, her voice strong and clear, a voice that had been suppressed for too long, is a defiance against silence, a building of truth. As she spoke, I began to shape the metal, the soft ping of the hammer echoing her words, a rhythmic counterpoint to her voice. And around us, dozens of women began to write, to draw, to sketch, to create, each finding their own way to break their silence, to forge their own truth, to build their own legacy. Through the vast windows, I could see the city skyline, the same view Dad once surveyed as his domain. But now it looked different. Now it looked like a landscape teeming with potential, with stories waiting to be told, with molds waiting to be broken, with truth waiting to be forged. Uncle Frank leaned against the wall, a quiet smile on his face. Now this, he said softly to Liam, this is what a creative revolution looks like. I smiled, adding a bold stroke of iridescent pigment to the metal I was shaping. No, I replied, looking at the women around me, at Mom speaking with such power, at the future we were building piece by piece. This is what building freedom looks like, one creation at a time. And in that moment, surrounded by art, truth, and the shared energy of creation, we were all exactly where we needed to be.